Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U, and today we're going to be doing Writing Movies That Matter. We're going to be focusing on how do you write a profound screenplay. Now, let me let you know up front, this is a real class. I'm going to give you the model. We're going to give you a really strong example, and that will give you some basic understanding of how this particular model works. Just so you have an idea of what we're doing, this isn't for what I'm going to do today. This should be enough for most people to stand back and go, "Wow, I understand now. There is a model, and there is a model that can work, and I can apply at least some portion of it." Depending upon your own personal experience, if you've written lots and lots of screenplays, all of this may make 100% sense to you. If you're relatively new to the process, there may be parts of it that you go, wow, I really need to understand that in a deeper way. But I promise you, there are some things I'm going to give you that step outside the current model for how most people write. In fact, there's going to be 3 or 4 things, even in today's call, that we've had people say that completely shifted how they thought about screenplays and how they designed their next script. Now, to start this out, let me just ask you this question. Have you ever had a movie that really did change your life in some way? And I don't mean that you walked out of the movie and decided to join the Army, although I do know some people who've done that. I mean, there was something about that movie that shifted you in some way. It either motivated you to take an action that you weren't normally taking. It gave you a whole perspective on a certain part of your life. It may have had you see where something you were doing was not getting you where you wanted to go. It may have been something that took it way further than that had a deep, profound effect on you. So we were looking, when we decided to design this program, we were looking for what are the movies that people say have had those kinds of impact. And my second criteria on this was, which of these movies have you watched over and over and over and over again? So The Matrix is one of them. And it's one of those movies that when I talk to people, I'll say, so how many times have you watched The Matrix? Probably half the people I talk to will say something like between 5 to 10. And that was our second part of the criteria. First part was, did it change your life? Second part was, did you then watch it over and over and over again? Because you know what? As writers, if we can accomplish those 2 things, we'll have had a profound impact on our culture, and on the human beings who watch our movies. And I'm guessing that's why you came here, because somewhere along the way, you may have decided that you wanted to write a movie that would change people's lives or would become something that people would guide their decisions based on. Somewhere along the way, you probably decided you wanted to write a profound movie. And so this is the model for that. Now, let me just back up so that you know where I'm coming from and who I am and why it would even be possible for me to come out with something like this, since nobody else has so far. There's a reason. I'm a guy who came from the world of corporate training. Before I came here 12 years ago, before I came to Los Angeles and started Screenwriting U, I had worked for 15 years designing training programs for major corporations all over the world. We'd worked with about 125 of the largest corporations, and I had a very unique experience that most trainers don't have. We would go in and do custom programs for these companies, and what that did was it put me in touch with the top people in each of those companies for training. I was working with the vice president of development of training. I was working with the head of HR. In some of the biggest companies in the world, we would design our program. Beforehand, they would do an assessment on the audience to see where was the audience having to do with this particular skill set. Then we would do the program, And then afterwards, 30 days afterwards, they would do a second assessment to see how much that had changed. So, for most training companies in the day when I was out there, most of them were really scared of that assessment thing. Oh my God, what if people didn't change? What if 30 days later they lost it? What if they didn't learn things? Right? For me, I took it on like, wow, this is going to be amazing. We get to actually see how well our programs work. We get to see, do they produce results? And so I was working with those vice presidents in charge of training, and I would go in up front saying, all right, our job is to create this transformation. We know you're going to do an assessment before and afterwards. You and I are going to partner together to figure out how do we make the most change for that audience. Now, I just want you to understand. So for 15 years, almost every time I worked with a major corporation, I got to work with their audience and do what I could to create transformation, to create some kind of change for them that they wanted. So from a training perspective, this way of thinking was my natural way of thinking. When I came into this industry, I walked in, I started talking with people, I'd written some screenplays, and I would say, I believe this movie can change people's lives, and people just shot me down left and right. And at that time, I didn't have enough experience to know what worked and what didn't work. And after a while, I gave up on that. That was 12 years ago. About a year ago, I looked up, and we've got programs that are actually changing people's lives, right? We've got classes that, for instance, our Pro Series and our Master Class, that are having people come in having never made a deal in their life or thinking it's impossible for them to ever get a movie made. And by the end of the program, they're able to make deals. We have, like in our Master Class, we actually have people who have made 5 and 6 deals during that program. They've optioned 2 or 3 screenplays. They've gotten writing assignments, right? Their lives are changing during the program. So in our actual classes, we are having this impact. So a year ago, I finally somehow woke up from the beatings that I took early on, and I put together 3 different development teams. And this is part of how I design. When I'm going for a big result, I often bring in development teams and we analyze the best movies in that particular area. But I put together 3 different development teams, and we went through and we took the top about 15 movies that accomplished those 2 criteria I told you earlier. That first, people say those movies changed their life. And second, they say, and I've watched that movie 10 times or 15 times, right? So we took those 2 criteria. We went in, we started analyzing those movies to see what was the model. What is it that they did that was different than all those others? And by the way, there were a whole bunch of movies that we loved that didn't actually do what I'm about to present today. So you need to know this. What we're presenting today is not just the regular model for how you write screenplays. There are going to be things in here that you say, oh yeah, I do that. Yes, I create an opening. Yes, I create an ending. Yes, I create a character arc. All of that. That's like saying, yes, I move dominoes around compared to what we're about to do. So again, we had the top 15 movies were the ones that met that criteria. Now, there were certain movies that I looked at and I was like, wow, I would really like that movie to be something that had that kind of profound impact. But when I actually looked at the model, those movies weren't delivering. And there was a reason. People didn't come out of those movies saying that movie changed my life. They were just really good movies. So I'm not putting down really good movies, and we're not saying that if somebody writes a really good movie, it's like, wow, that's great. That doesn't make it transformational. So what does is when you use the kinds of things that actually have that particular impact. Now, let me tell you what we're going to do here today. First, we're going to start with the model, which is on the second page of your handout. And I will take you through that so that you can see the steps of this model. Then I will take you through the matrix so that you actually see how those steps show up in the matrix. And by the way, by implication, in all the other movies that we chose that fit those two criteria. Then we will talk about the 30-day class that's coming up on this subject, which is called the Profound Screenwriter. It's about how you, as a screenwriter, become a profound writer, how you are able to accomplish the things that will actually have your screenplay and your movie change people's lives. And as I go through that, if this is something that's important to you, if the idea of being able to shift a culture, the idea of being able to have people come into your movie, and when they walk out, they have a more healthy perspective on life, they have a different perspective, or even if it's about changing people's beliefs, the class that we're talking about is designed to help you do that. So if that's important to you, you'll really want to listen to that particular class. But for the moment, let's just jump into this. If you can pull out that second page of your handout. And you'll notice that this is like looks like an envelope. We originally did that because we thought the whole purpose was to deliver a message. And this is from early in the model, and it just stuck for the moment. It's actually an easy way to have you see the whole model. But we found out, you know what? It's not just about delivering a message. People can write scripts that deliver messages like crazy. It's about, does the message change people's lives, right? And that requires something much deeper. Now, with the three groups that I worked with, the three development teams, I worked with them each for about 2 months, and each one of them, I intentionally had a therapist in them. So I had people who were screenwriters who were also therapists. The reason I did that was because we were talking about real change, right? So I wanted to see what the therapist model was like on this and how they saw it, and also have them be part of the interactions as we designed this. So this really it does create change from a very deep level. So let's start with right in the middle. You'll see right in the middle, this is the envelope. It says, number one, what's the blank? Now again, originally I thought it was the message, and we thought this whole thing was about the message. And that's us just telling people, hey, here's our message, take it on, use it to change your life. What I realized was, and this took us, we probably analyzed 10 movies before we had this breakthrough, and it was huge. When we had this breakthrough, it changed everything. The real question isn't what's the message. The question is, what's the change that you want your audience to experience? What's the change that you want your audience to experience? If you understand that, if you start with the change, because that's very different than the message, right? The message may be, treat people better. The change may be that they have an internal sympathetic response to what's going on with certain people, right? That internally they no longer feel like, who cares? And instead of that, they actually feel sympathy, or they feel some kind of concern for those people, and because of that, they're going to be willing to take some kind of action. So let's say that's the change, right? That's different than just giving them the message, because we got television that is just constantly throwing message after message after message at us. We have the internet that's constantly throwing message after message after message. What we want to do here is we want to have people come in and have the kind of life change that shifts them. So we've got to start out knowing what the change is. Now, knowing what the change is, then we base the rest of the model around it. So I hope this makes sense to you. Let's go to number 2. So up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see there it says opening that, and then underneath it says shows old ways. Please put these words: opening that connects. An opening that connects. It needs to connect with the audience. It needs to connect with us in such a way so that we say, "That's me on the screen." And I'm gonna give you some examples of that in the Matrix, because most people that I talk to, I say, "Whose life were you living when you watched that story, The Matrix?" And the answer is Neo. Right? They intentionally did things to have us connect. And I'm not talking about likability. Likability is the thing that most people do. It's number 4 on my list. I have 4 different ways that you can have people connect. Likability is the least impactful of the 4. So most people are going for likability. I'm going to tell you what made Neo work was 2 of the other ones, 2 of the higher ones. So you need to be able to connect and have us say, "That's me on the screen." You also need to show us the old ways, because if what we're going to do is we're going to have a change occur for the audience, we're going to be starting with, here's how it always has been. Here's what it's normally like for everybody. It's the old ways, and we're not putting down the old ways. We're just presenting them so that that's the old status quo. Right? Then we're going to move all the way to the right-hand side, top right, number 3, when you deliver a profound ending. A profound ending. Now, this is the vision of where you want your audience to go. You want them, by the end of this, to have an experience of having the change happen for them. So again, it's like most people, again, when they get to this point, they're thinking it's just the message. Yes, you're going to deliver whatever message at that point, and the job is to deliver it powerfully. But what makes the movie profound, first, is that you have an ending that actually fits the definition of profound. It delivers something profound. Second, that the change has been completed in a way that we can accept, and that we now have this new way of being. Now, let's be clear on this. So you'll see number 4 up there. Number 4 goes from number 1 to number 3. Originally, what we thought was, okay, this is the character arc, and in some ways it is, but character arc didn't define what we really were trying to accomplish. It was like, you know what? I've seen lots of movies with character arcs that did not shift me as a viewer. My guess is you've seen hundreds of movies that, yes, okay, there was a character arc there. The lead character changed in some way, and we walk out afterwards, and it's like, okay, that was satisfying and interesting. Did it change your life? So, and I don't mean to be so adamant about this, but I got to tell you, once you understand this model, it is astounding what you can actually do. Now, before I tell you number 4 and we go in and figure out the rest, let me say this. I am not saying that 100% of the people that go into any theater will have their lives changed by watching a movie. That is not it. And I'm not saying that 50% or 30%. We have no idea how much of an impact it's going to have. What I am saying is that when people tell me certain movies changed their lives, this stuff is in it. And it's different for different people. And it's also different for different time frames in your life. So there's a whole subjective side to this, absolutely, no doubt. You may watch one movie during a certain heavy emotional time in your life, and it'll completely change your life. You may watch it again 10 years later when you don't have that emotional issue going on, and it'll be like, okay, yeah, I can see why I like that movie, but that's it, right? Our objective, though, is to give you, as the writer, the power to be able to create movies that can potentially shift people. So I just want to clear that up before we go through the rest of the model. So here we go. Number 4. Notice that this starts at the beginning and it goes all the way to the end. This is the transformational journey. The transformational journey. So this is actually different than a character arc. It's much more profound. Character arc is like a really light version of what we're talking about. What makes this transformational, you're going to see in just a minute, is number 7 and number 8. So when we get to those, you will see a big part of why a transformational journey is not just a character arc. It's the journey, and by the way, let me define it clearly. It's the journey that causes change for the audience. So a character arc is the change the character made. They went from A to B. That may or may not cause any change for the audience. The audience may sit and watch that character arc, and it makes no difference whatsoever. You've probably had this experience where you come out of a theater, you go to dinner with your date, you're sitting there, and somewhere in the middle, somebody says, "What movie did we see?" And everybody at the table has to try to remember what movie we just saw because it didn't have an impact. You've probably also come out of theaters where people have gone to dinner afterwards, and all they can talk about is that movie. And they're not talking about it because it was like, oh, my God, the blood, the shock, and that kind of thing. They're talking about it because it made a shift for them, because they see something different. So this transformational journey, this is the journey the audience goes on. So that's important. All right, let's go down to number 5, bottom left-hand corner. And I'm going to talk about 2 characters here in your movie. Early on, we thought protagonist, antagonist. We were just, we were starting with all the things that everybody starts with. I've taught protagonist, antagonist for a long, long time. There's all kinds of valuable things about it. I'm not putting it down. But in the midst of this, what we saw was sometimes the protagonist was the one who changed. Sometimes it was the antagonist. Sometimes it was other people. So we stood back and went, wait a minute, this model isn't about whether or not the antagonist changed, I don't care, or the protagonist, or that. It's about who changes. So number 5 over here, please write in the words transformable character. Transformable character. That's whoever changes. That's it. In different movies, it's different people. In The Matrix, obviously it's Neo who makes the change. He's the transformable character. In Dead Poets Society, it's the boys who make the change. In Gandhi, it's the nation of India who makes the change. Right? So whoever it is, that's the transformable character. Right? On the other side of that, go all the way to the right-hand side, number 6, you'll see, I'd like you to put in the words change agent. Change agent. Now, notice this. The transformable character is on the same side as the opening, the beginning of the movie. They're starting with the old ways, right? The transformable character begins in the old ways. The change agent is on the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side here, on the same side as the vision, the ultimate ending. The change agent has some experience of that vision. And this is important because part of what they're going to do is they're going to guide or prompt or push or coach the transformational character into the change. Now, it doesn't have to be a coaching movie. We watched some of those. Remember the Titans. And whether you like Remember the Titans or not, if you watch that movie from a transformational perspective, it it creates a major shift. There's some things that it does that are very, very interesting. But in that one, yeah, they had a coach who was a change agent. Denzel Washington played the change agent in that movie. So it could be a coach, but it could be, as little as, the like in Groundhog Day, the producer who the Bill Murray character ended up, first he despised in the beginning, and then he ended up liking her, and then he ended up falling in love with her. She didn't do that much, but she was the change agent. She was the thing that motivated him to shift, motivated him to go through Groundhog Day in a different way in order to create a relationship with her. So it's going to be different for different movies. You just need to know there's a change agent, and they have some experience of the vision. Now, by the way, in Groundhog Day, her experience of the vision was that she had the model he needed to adopt. She had the perspective, the way of thinking that he needed to take on that was much, much more human. He was closed off, as he was kind of a narcissist. That was the old ways for him. And he needed to actually start considering and being kind to other human beings. And so that was the part of the model that she brought to the table. Okay, so now let's talk about number 7 and number 8. Number 7 starts at the bottom left-hand corner, and then it goes through what's the change up to the top right-hand corner, where it finally gets to the ending, the vision, right? And then you'll see number 8 is basically the little hash marks all the way across the top. We'll talk about those in a moment. But here was one of the things that we saw a lot. People would write movies, write screenplays, and they would have a screenplay where this character was an everyday kind of character, and they went through the entire movie. Nothing changed for them until we got to the third act, and then all of a sudden they became the hero. And it was like, okay, 2 problems with that. Problem number 1 was many times it's unbelievable. And by the way, I'm not saying it's not realistic. I'm not saying it doesn't ever happen in life where somebody who has, no background whatsoever steps in and be a hero. Yes, that does happen. But it's unrealistic in general for somebody to make this huge jump at the very end when they haven't made any change along the way. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, when somebody writes a script like that, you're not giving the audience the experience of making the incremental changes along the way. And we were in the midst of this, and we were looking at it, and it was like, wait a minute, the movies that really had an impact on us, they did that. They allowed us to make changes one little step at a time all the way through until finally we were up here at this huge change where everything was different. So that is called, and please write these words under number 7, that is called a gradient of change. A gradient of change. So your job is to help us experience the change all along the way. Now, this doesn't mean that you preach the message at us. I've seen lots of scripts where somebody would keep, every step of the way they would keep telling us the same message. That's a monotone kind of thing. What we're talking about is having your lead character, the Neo character, go through a whole series of activities that shift them. And in the midst of going through those, you see the change. You think about Groundhog Day, the Bill Murray character. It was like he's going through that day over and over and over and over and over. And each day he's making some kind of change. Now, some of the changes he's making aren't good. But he's getting to experience his dark side early on, right? And it's just with each shift, somewhere along the way there he falls in love. Somewhere along the way he decides that he's going to actually do something with his life. Somewhere along the way he then starts to adapt to the new model until finally we get to the end and it's believable, right? And I'll show you that having to do with with Neo in The Matrix in just a moment, you'll see the gradient of change. By the way, we actually have 3 different gradients of change for that you can apply to your lead character in order to take them through that journey. So I'm going to give you one of the gradients of change. I'm going to give you. Let's see which one I'm going to give you here today. I'm going to give you the psychological gradient of change today. So, but please know this. We discovered 3 of these. These were so important. This makes such a tremendous difference to be able to take the audience through in a way that has them accept each little step of the change on the way to the end goal. And we do this emotionally, we do this psychologically, we do this through the action, right? There's multiple ways that you can do it, and there's specific things that if you understand them, you can just lay that into your screenplay. And it's very, very easy. You just need to know the model. So that's the first one. This is about the transformational journey up there, number 4. And what number 7 does, the gradient of change, is it allows us to accept this one little bit at a time. Now we go to number 8. Number 8, you'll see the hash marks all the way across there. Number 8 is a combination of 2 different things. And I'll just give them to you, and then we'll talk about them. First one is challenges. So put in challenges / profound moments. Challenges / profound moments. So this is the other thing that makes such a difference when it comes to creating that transformational journey. You've got to start out in the beginning challenging the old ways of thinking. Now, this doesn't mean you argue with them. It means you give us an experience of them where we see that, those don't work anymore. And there's a whole bunch of ways to do that. We have figured this out like you wouldn't believe. But if you leave the old ways completely intact, it's really hard for people to accept the new ways. So for the first thing we do is we challenge those old ways, and we've got some amazing stuff on this. You guys will absolutely love it. Then after a certain period, once those old ways have been challenged enough, as you're going up the gradient, once those old ways have been challenged enough, then we start to layer in the new way of thinking through a series of profound moments. Those moments are the kinds of scenes that you come out from a movie and you play that scene in your mind over and over and over. Right? In some cases, there are moments where people are experiencing love. In some cases, there are moments where people are experiencing a completely different emotional experience than they're used to. It's moments like if you go to the end of Groundhog Day, when the boy stood up, the one who was scared to death, I think his name was, I'll think of it in a second. When he stood up on the table or on the desk, despite the fact that the headmaster was yelling at him, and was willing to stand for what he believed. That was one of those moments, right? A moment where we saw his new way of being. And I'll just use that one as an example. But the truth is those moments were layered in. There were a whole series of them on the way to that one, that each one gave us a new understanding or a new experience of this new way of being. So and by the way, these scenes, once you start creating them and you understand them, they just naturally fit into your script. It's like even if you think back in the old model, the character arc model, it's like, you know what? As you're doing a character arc, you're having the character change, right? You're having them experience some kind of change. But here what we're doing is we're adding in these kinds of things, these profound moments. We're adding in the challenges that actually cause the change for the audience. That's the big, big difference. Let's see. So that was number 8. Let's go to the left-hand side, number 9. And you'll notice number 9 points inward, and also number 10 does the same thing. Number 9, please put the word entertainment. Entertainment. So the reason we put this one in is because sometimes when we get to the point where we're trying to deliver something profound, we forget that our job is to entertain. If a movie, like I was reading one script here about 3-4 weeks ago, and I called up the writer on it, and I said, "Here, I just want to check. I'm about 15 pages into it. This is a documentary, right?" So it's a documentary. And she goes, No, this is my story. It's a movie. And I said, okay, because you've written it. There's no entertainment. You've written it in such a serious way, and it's only the facts. And she says, well, I did a year's worth of research on this. And I'm like, okay, all right. So now you need to do a pass that is just about entertainment. And you also need to consider how much of this information do we really need versus how can you make this way more entertaining. Now, it's going to take her 2 or 3 passes because you guys know this. Anybody who's done the whole research trap, the more you research, the longer it's going to take for you to get back to being able to tell a story. Yes, you have massive amounts of details, and those details can really be helpful at certain places, but now you need to go back to actually entertaining the audience, because that's one of the biggest reasons people go to movies. So even when you're doing something profound, even when you're changing their lives, you've got to entertain them. You absolutely have to entertain them. So entertainment means you've got conflict, right? It means this is an emotional roller coaster. It means that we're going to be caught up in the emotions of the characters, and we're going to be experiencing their lives and what they're going through. We're going to be worried about them. That stuff has to be built in, and we're not going on this journey to get information. Let me say one other thing. Part of the reason why I think people do the information overload version, where they research it to death, is because they think that information is going to change the audience. It doesn't. That's not it. It's if you can get this model into it, this model will change the audience. So, number 10, on the far right-hand side, the other part you want to build into this is insights. Insights. So what this is about is, are you giving us anything that has any depth, right? You got to look deeper, right? You got to be, if you're trying to shift people's lives, part of that shift are those insights into who human beings are, what we do, how we live, how we change. If you have a specific topic that you're dealing with, what are the insights into that? Not the information. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the breakthroughs that people can have, the kind of breakthroughs that your character has, and as the character has them, we have them with them, right? Because, again, part of shifting somebody in this experience is having them have that insightful moment that now has life look different, right? That now gives them more power, more capability, more understanding of what has happened in their lives. So we build in those insights, and again, in the 30-day program, we spend a lot of time on this, and you're going to love what you learn there. Let's go to number 11. Everything comes together to deliver a profound truth. Please put in the words, a profound truth. Now, this is in some cases only slightly different than delivering your message. You may have a message, a specific message. And by the way, your message may be profound. It absolutely is possible. Most of the messages that I see, they are good, strong, important things to live by, but they're not profound. So what this becomes about is looking at your message and saying, what's the deeper truth? What is it beneath the surface of that again will make a change for people, that they will recognize that deeper truth and it will shift them. So that's the model. If you actually take this model and apply it, you'll be astounded what it does for a screenplay. You're about to watch it here in The Matrix. But this is, hearing about it and doing it are really kind of two different things. You guys know how that is. This is more about taking the actions and really thinking from this particular perspective. So let's go into the Matrix and talk about it for a moment. And pardon me, I've got something going on with my voice, but we'll make it through here. So The Matrix, huge success. You know, they did 2 sequels after the original Matrix. The Wachowski brothers wrote this screenplay and directed the movie. A big part of what made this movie amazing, though, I'm going to tell you, is what they did that was profound. If this would have just been a story about this guy who fights the computer construct, and it's just simply an action movie, I don't think people would have watched it 15 times. You have no idea how many times I've talked to people, and I'll say, let me just ask you, how many times have you seen The Matrix? And they almost always, if they've seen it once, they've seen it 5 times at least. And I've had people, like when we did this particular program, when we did the development team, I had most of the people in there said, I have seen it 15 times. I've seen it 10 times, and I never saw all of what we're about to do right here. I never saw this model, but it affected me, right? And it's like, so that's where we're going here. So let's start at the beginning. Number 1 there, and I'll go through some of these that stand out to me. What's the change you want to make? And in this case, this movie, if you look at the character arc was Neo going from living a tiny, desperate life to being the one, the only one who had control of the Matrix, right? So he's making a huge journey there. But the change, so that's the character arc, but the change we wanted to make for the audience is that they become the one in their world. That they go to the point of having more control of their own lives. They take on this thing. They're the one. They're the one who can change their world. So that's the change. Now, if you go with that, then we go through these other steps. Now, let me just clear up the entertaining one. Just a second. Okay. The entertaining story here, it's kind of interesting. First, obviously, there's a major conflict. There's a major journey. These people are staking all of their lives, everything they're doing, on whether or not this guy is the one, right? So there's high stakes. They're hoping that this is the one person who can change their world and take over and take control of the Matrix and all of that kind of thing, right? But it's also, in this case, it's the Jesus story. It's the Buddha story. It's the President of the United States story. It's the story of somebody coming from among us and becoming great. It's the story of somebody who can change the world to the level that those people did, that Jesus did, that Buddha did, that somebody who could become President of the United States could do, right? So, in fact, in one of the early scenes, it's the follow the white rabbit one. Knock, knock, Neo. He opens the door. Here's a guy and his girlfriend standing there. And he gives the guy the computer program, and the guy's like, "Man, you're my own personal Jesus. He says, "You're my own personal savior, my Jesus," right? So it's like, yeah, they're creating kind of that metaphor along the way. I like that metaphor. It's interesting, and And it's another way of thinking about the whole process. That wasn't the metaphor that changed everything, though. But what it does do is it makes this story transformational, right? As in, it makes the story entertaining. It makes this story engaging. It gives us another layer of it. But let's talk about how the transformation occurs. Number 3. We need a deep connection with this audience, and that on that particular one, yes, we're opening the screenplay in a way that that is interesting, that is compelling, all of that kind of thing. But when it comes to Neo, again, I've talked to so many people who I say, who was the character whose story you're living when you watch this? And their answer is Neo, right? Why? So, likability, yeah, that's there. That's number 4. But let me give you a couple of others. Part of it has to do with relatability, as in we can relate to that character, right? Neo wonders what the Matrix is. So do we at the beginning. If this is your first time to see this movie, you don't know what the Matrix is. They're saying it's all around them. That there's something really interesting going on, but you're wondering what the Matrix is, and Neo is wondering what the Matrix is. So we're relating with him there. Neo doesn't know if he should follow the white rabbit. We don't know either, but we want him to, because if he follows the white rabbit, at least he's going on that journey. Something is happening there. Neo doesn't know anyone at the party. We're at the party. He's standing over against the wall on the side. We're in the same spot. We don't know anybody at that party. Neo is late for work, and he's scolded for it. I don't know how many times that's happened for you. It's happened for me quite a few times. It's kind of a common experience. And then he steps out on the ledge, and Neo is clearly afraid of heights. And we feel that fear. Now, they did a great job in their directing on that, right? How they set that up. They really did give you that fear. But the majority of this is going to show up in the writing. Because we are relating to Neo, because we're starting more and more and more to say, that's me on the screen. Right? You can put a character up there and you can make them likable. You can have them save the cat or whatever they do. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't have that be me on the screen. We just saw somebody save a cat. Oh, that's really nice. Right? In some cases, if it's the villain who just did that, it's like, okay, they saved the cat. I feel a little better about them, but that's not me on the screen. I'm sorry, I'm not that serial killer today. But because of the way they set this up so that we related to this character every step of the way, and there were about 10 other things they did early on to cause us to relate to the character. That makes a big difference. Let's go to the next one. The second thing I think they did that made this character somebody that was us was using intrigue. So intrigue... What intrigue does is it sucks us into the character. It sucks us into the journey. It has us wonder what's going to happen, right? So starting out, the agent tells the cops that the 2 units he sent to get Trinity are already dead. Right? It's like we've seen the units break into the room. Here's Trinity sitting there looking the other way. They've got guns on her. Now we cut down to the street. The agent shows up. The cop's like, hey, we sent 2 units up there. That's enough for a little girl. And the agent turns around and says, your men are already dead, right? And then we watch that happen. And in the midst of watching that happen, of course, we're watching the intrigue of the kind of martial arts she's doing, the flying, all that kind of thing. That then, why I'm talking about that is that sets up one of the other main characters. But she then becomes the one that goes to Neo. So now the intrigue, knock, knock, on the computer screen. Follow the white rabbit. And then we see a tattoo on the woman's shoulder. So it's intriguing. What's going to happen here? There's something going on under the surface here. There's something we don't understand. How is it that she's able to take over Neo's computer? Right? How is it that she's able to predict the White Rabbit? How is it that she's able to beat the living crap out of those cops on that? Then Trinity shows up and she knows things about Neo, and she says that, I know things about you. Right? She says, I know things about you, and she does, right? And so that's intriguing. The fact that when she says her name, he instantly knows who she is. That's intriguing. There are things going on underneath the surface that these surface items are pointing to, and that are having us go, "Wow, what's going on? Why is this happening? What is the situation?" The whole conversation, what is the Matrix, is intriguing. And the fact that they both have the same question, and it seems to be a question that a lot of people have, maybe. The phone being delivered by the FedEx guy, right? This shows up. Neo opens up the package. Bam, the phone rings the moment it's in his hand, right? That's intriguing. How did that happen? There's something going on under the surface. Then Morpheus is able, when Morpheus isn't even there, he's able to guide Neo through his escape from the agents. Now, those agents seem to be fairly effective, and they're everywhere. And yet, Neo is able to get out and go through that maze because Morpheus is guiding him. How does he do that? That's intriguing. Then the whole question about, is Neo really the one? That also is intriguing, right? So what they've done is, early on, and by the way, there's a lot more of this, but early on, they have set it up so we are constantly experiencing some kind of intrigue connected around these main characters, which then makes it easy. That draws us in. It sucks us into that story, and it sucks us into who his life is and who he is and what he's about. Now, since he's the one that's about to go on the journey, it's even more. So by the time we even get to the real journey, we're already connected to this guy, right? And we're already worried about him, and we're already thinking, wow, something serious is about to happen here. I think I already talked about this, but the difference is the change agent versus the transformable character. The transformable character, obviously, is Neo, right? He's the one who is going to make the big change, and we're already set to go on the journey with him. We just now met Morpheus when the phone rang, and we heard about him. But Morpheus is the change agent. So Morpheus is the one who already knows what the Matrix is. Neo doesn't know. Neo has no idea what it is. In fact, if you ask him for real, he wouldn't be able to. His version wouldn't even get close to matching what it really is. But Morpheus knows. Morpheus has been on the other side of that vision. Morpheus understands where they're going and what they're trying to accomplish. He understands enough to be able to kick the shit out of Neo during their kung fu training, and he knows this isn't air we're breathing. This doesn't exist. So he's the guide in this particular case. The oppression, by the way, which is another part of the model that I didn't talk about, this is also pretty important. The relentless force that never stops and that keeps the pressure on these people is the Matrix itself. So now let's talk about the transformational journey. So the big question for this movie, if you were writing this movie, the big question is, how do you make it believable that a person could make such a radical shift? Right? And if, again, you may not have thought about that when you were watching it, but if you were writing it, that would be a major concern. How do you do that? How do you have an audience not only believe it, but go through the change with them, with Neo, right? And at the end, not walk out and go, oh, that was stupid. I can't believe that he would ever be able to see the computer-generated letters. You know, It's like how could he do that, right? But it's like they did this step by step. They took us through this gradient, and I'm going to give you one of the gradients here for how they did that. So this one's the psychological gradient for being the one, and in this case, it's incredibly important that you have a psychological gradient because if you think about it, Neo is having to experience an internal change in a huge way where his entire world first just disappeared, and now somehow he has to be able to be in the middle of being shot at by agents and yet still perform at an incredible level that where he has mastery over that particular over the Matrix, right? So we got to go through this step by step, and it's not a thing of, wow, they just plugged in the thing in the back of his head and suddenly he knew it, right? They plugged the what was it? The Kung Fu program in. He wakes up and says, I know Kung Fu, right? And it's like, okay, you would think, wow, look at that. They made a major change in him. Now, that's not a change you and I can experience right now. But then he gets inside the Kung Fu program and fights with Neo, and yes, he does know Kung Fu, and yes, he can operate and do really well. He's got some pretty good moves and that kind of thing. But Morpheus keeps kicking his ass. So there's levels of this stuff, and by the way, Morpheus is kicking his ass because Morpheus knows and understands the rules. He tells him up front, there are rules to this construct that you have to adhere to, and then there are rules you can bend. You need to be able to know the difference, right? And it's like, so he even though he's got I know Kung Fu plugged into the back of his head, he still has to make an internal shift. So that's where we're going here. So let me take you through this. This is the psychological gradient for being the one. It starts out first with him being completely unaware but suspecting. So in the beginning, he's all about, he wants to know what the Matrix is. There's something there. He doesn't know what it is. He's unaware of it. He doesn't realize that he's in it and living it every single day, but he's suspecting. Then he chooses to take the red pill. So he chooses to go on the journey. Now, there's a period in there where he's reluctant before that, especially when they're trying to take that thing out of his stomach. But he chooses to take the red pill and to go on the journey. That's important on this because it's part of the process. Now then, he's questioning if he's the one. And it's because everybody's telling him he's the one, because people are saying that's why he was brought there. Morpheus tells him it in one of the first exchanges they have on the phone, and then tells him it over and over, right? So he's now questioning it. It's like, how could I be the one? Is it really possible? Do you think I'm the one? Right? So he's starting to make a little bit of a shift here. Then number 3, he finds out that being the one is a magical way of thinking. Now that's my interpretation. You could say it a different way, but it's your thinking, and this is in the Kung Fu simulation. He finds out that how you think in that situation actually controls whether you succeed or not. And so that's pretty important. At that point, they go to see the Oracle, and this takes us to number 4. The Oracle, and this is my list right now. The Oracle tells him, well, the Oracle doesn't tell him he's not the one. Let's just be clear on that. Most people, when they look at that scene, they say the Oracle told him that he's not the one. I thought that for a long time. But I watched it here just a couple of days ago, and it's like, no, the Oracle doesn't say that. She says, but you're going to say, she's examining his hands. She says, I would say blah, 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 but you're going to say, and he goes, I'm not the one. And she goes, sorry, honey. You've got the gift, but you seem to be waiting for something. And he says, what? And she says, another lifetime, maybe. Right? So she didn't tell him he's not the one. But he told her he's not the one. So at that point, he has a lot of doubt about it. He doesn't believe this is possible or this is for real, even though things are shifting. What she told him was he has the gift. He's just waiting. What's he waiting for? Right? So it's still not something he's totally accepted. So then she gives him a dilemma. And this is also an important part of this psychological gradient of change. She gives him a dilemma. It's either going to be his life or Morpheus's life. So now he is guilt-ridden about that. He doesn't, he doesn't believe he's the one, but he knows that Morpheus is going to be willing to give up his life for Neo. He's got to do something about that. And then it comes to the point where Morpheus has been taken by the agents. He's being tortured, and Neo chooses to sacrifice himself. So think about this for a moment. This is actually part of being the one. I don't know whether Neo believes he can do it or not. He says he believes he can do it at that point. But this is the point where the belief and the physical come together. He is taking this step where he is willing to risk his own life to save Morpheus. So he's starting to think he can do this. He's starting to believe he can do this. Even though he still doesn't think he's the one. He thinks maybe he can solve this, and if not, he's going to give up his life. Then, at that point, they go in, they get Morpheus back, but Neo stays behind to fight the agents, and he's testing himself. He wants to see what he can do. He should run. Everybody's told him he should run, but he's going to stand there and fight this agent. And ultimately, he ends up in a hallway. He steps through a door. There's an agent who shoots him point blank in the chest and then shoots him a whole bunch of times, and Neo dies. This is still part of the psychological gradient of being the one. Trinity at that point then expresses her love for him, that he can't possibly be dead because the Oracle told her she would fall in love with the one, and she loves him, right? So this is the thing that causes him to come back, that brings him back from the dead. And now he rises from the dead, and for the first time, he can see the Matrix. He can see the computer-generated numbers and all that kind of thing. And he defeats the agents for the first time. So this is essentially the psychological gradient that he went through. Now, by the way, it wouldn't be the exact same thing for your characters because your characters probably aren't in the Matrix. Your characters would go through, and your lead character would go through a different psychological gradient that would fit the situation they're in and the change that they need to make. It's just important to understand, it's like, again, if you design a gradient that allows the audience to go through the change with the character step by step, you've got a much better chance of keeping us and taking us through that. Let me just point to one other thing, and it's actually I've got a couple of things to say about this, but it's the whole thing of challenging belief systems, and I want to point this out because this is critically important. And we made some serious discoveries in this area that I think are huge. So in this particular case, we have a guy who his identity is going to change, right? So we're not just making a change on a level where somebody says, I feel better about something. I'm talking about the character feeling better about life, or I'm more motivated, and so I'll go run for the football team or whatever. We're not making a change on that level. It's not just an emotional change. We're not just making a change on the level of the person having an insight or a breakthrough. There were multiple insights and breakthroughs throughout this process. They were part of the smaller bits of the change, right? But in this case, they're changing his identity. He's going from being somebody who thinks he has no control for real to somebody who is the only human being who has complete control of the Matrix on this, right? It's like, that's huge. He's going from being somebody who is holed up and afraid to somebody who has the courage to stand up to the agents. That's huge, right? It's because of an identity shift. They're telling him he's not who he thinks he is. He's someone else. He's the one, right? So this is big. If you're trying to make that kind of big change, you absolutely need to challenge the old ways. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of minor things that they did here that make a big difference. First, they're calling his identity into question. And his identity gets called into question in a whole bunch of places, in really small ways that are really interesting. Neo thinks he's one thing; they're telling him he's a different. So first, his boss asks him to choose his identity. Is he the one who's in his seat at 9 a.m., or is he the one who loses his job? Right? And it's like, wow, that's kind of an interesting thing. And he just immediately snaps in and says, yes, sir, I'll be there on time from now on. Right? And he goes and does his thing. Right? But it's like, even that moment was an identity question moment. Then Agent Smith, when they bring him into the interrogation room, and this is in the beginning of the movie, they bring him into the interrogation room, sit him down. Agent Smith says, you seem to have two identities here. One is a good citizen who pays his taxes. The other is a hacker. Only one of them, and this is important, he says, only one of them has a future. So, again, they're challenging his identity. Now, where anybody sitting there watching would go is, of course, what Agent Smith means is the only one that has a future is Mr. Anderson, the guy who works at the corporation. But the truth is his statement is correct. Only one of them has a future, and the one who has a future is Neo. Right? So they're giving him an identity choice here. Now then we take it one step further. Morpheus tells him, I believe you're the one. So Morpheus is saying, I know you think this is who you are. You think that Mr. Anderson is your identity. But you're actually the one. So Morpheus is telling him directly that he's someone different than he thinks he is. They're challenged. These are challenges. And then he gives him a choice between two pills. And he says, take the blue pill. You wake up on your bed. Nothing has changed in your life. All of this goes away, and that's who you are. Take the red pill, and I'll take you deeper into Wonderland, and you'll see what this whole thing is about. And the implication is, and that's who you are. So these are all challenges on his identity that along the way, and by the way, there are a series of other challenges that happen on having to do with his identity that set up and have us dismiss the old way. And it has Neo start to go, okay, that's not me, about the old way. So we're taking the old ways, we're challenging them. Then, of course, there's a whole series of profound things for installing the new ways and having him start to see who he is. You take the Kung Fu, just them saying he's the one and that Morpheus believes that he's the one. But you go into the Kung Fu program, he's faster than everyone else, but in order to do this, he actually has to have the profound experience of recognizing that he can change those rules. He can speed up. That the only reason he's getting beat is because he's not thinking from the perspective of the one. So we're shifting things there. The whole thing of later on, Neo says, what are you trying to tell me, that I can dodge bullets? And Morpheus says, no, Neo, I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to. Right? These are things that are shifting him to the new way and having him see new ways of thinking about things. And there's a whole series of others that are like that. But let me just say this. if you watch this movie from the perspective of this model, what you're going to see is it stands out. It's all over the place. Now, you've got a certain experience of this so far. You've had a chance to at least hear about some of this. I'm going to tell you what you've just heard and what we've just done is about half of day one of this program. If what you want to do is to be able to create truly profound movies, if you want to be able to change people's lives and maybe even make shifts in cultures, learning this model will make a huge difference for you. So let me walk you through real fast how the class goes so that you can see what's possible. So if you pull out the page that has the actual class, starting with day one, we already talked about most of day one is what we just covered. This gives you a really good idea of the kinds of things you're going to learn in this class. Day two is then about defining the change and the entertaining story. Now, we do those two together. So you've come into this class with one of two things. You've either come in with an idea of a story you'd like to write that you would like to be profound, or you're coming in with a screenplay you've already written that you want to make profound. So in day two, you're defining what the change is so that everything else is focused around that. Again, remember back to the model that I presented. The core of this is understanding the change. If you don't know what the change is, it's really almost impossible to make it. If you're coming from the message, you're coming from the very last part of the thing instead of coming from the beginning. So the message doesn't give you all the things you need to be able to put this model together and to make that profound change. The change does. So you're going to define the change and then also define how you're going to make this story entertaining so that from the beginning you are focused on those two together. In day three, then you will create the transformational journey for your story. And you're going to lay it out. What's the change that the audience is going to make? How do you take them from the old ways to the new ways? This becomes so clear when you lay it out properly. So with each step of this, you are going to gain deep insights into your own screenplay. Day four, now you get clear on who the change agent is, who the transformable character is. And by the way, yes, there are lots of different characters in your script. Sometimes there are certain characters that really are going to stand out as the change agent. Sometimes there are certain characters that are really going to stand out as the transformable character. But you will understand what these two are, what's important about them, what needs to stay there for them to work, and you will apply it immediately to your story. On day 5 and 6, we're going to give you 3 different gradients of change, and you will build them for your story. Now, in here, the example I just gave you, I gave you the psychological gradient of change. But I'm going to tell you the other 2 also exist inside the matrix. And that's where even just going through just these 2 days is going to completely change your life when it comes to screenplays, because you now will know how to create a journey that people live on multiple levels. And again, this is the stuff that's invisible. Most people don't look at the matrix and say, wow, I see 3 different gradients of change in the matrix that character went through that caused me as the audience to live it. But by the time you're done with these 2 days, you will understand that in a deep, deep way. You'll be able to put that in any screenplay you write. Day 7, now it's about how do you connect with that audience so that they'll follow you. We're going to give you, again, 4 different ways to do that. We showed 2 of them here with the matrix, but I'm going to tell you, I just explained them with the matrix. I didn't explain how you do them. You can actually, it's amazing what you can do to get us connected to that character. On day 8, then it's about leaving us with a profound ending. Now what you're doing is you're going to the end of your script and you're saying, wait a minute, how do I not just end it, but how do I do it in a profound way that fits what this whole story is about, that fits the transformation that I'm here to make with the audience, right? So you're going to give us a profound ending that delivers it emotionally, that has us see and experience and live the character making the change, and that delivers the profound truth that you want to deliver in a powerful way. So that's very, very important. But now we're going to get to the really good stuff. So all of this is very, very powerful. If we stopped at this point, you know what? I promise you'd be able to write far more profound screenplays than you can right now. But once we get to day 9 through about day 13, these things will change your life. And that is, how do you shift belief systems? Now, I'll tell you, again, in every development team, we had 2 different kinds of people there. I had therapists in every one of them who believe that you can shift people's beliefs. And I had people who were like, that's not possible. And I intentionally did that when we designed this program. So for this part, what happened was we were having conversations where the people who were saying it's not possible were very adamant early on. By the time we developed this model, every one of those people were saying at the end, wow, I can't believe we can do this. You can do it. It's actually real. You can shift people's perspectives. You can shift their ways of thinking. So we give you a whole series of ways to doing that, but I'm going to give you the simple way to think about it. We spend a couple of days working on how do you challenge the old ways? How do you challenge people's old beliefs? And we've got some profound stuff in here on how to do this. It's very amazing, and it's also very simple once you understand it. You will then immediately apply that to your screenplay. You will go through and start looking at how you're going to challenge their beliefs, and you will be able to apply that immediately. Then the second part of this, and this is on day 11 and 12 there, is now we're going to work with how do you then give them profound moments of the new way, right? And we've got a whole series of different ways you can do that are very different than you think. These are all about how do you have us have a profound experience of this new way that works right after having the old ways challenged. So we're actually in a receptive state. We're trying to solve what the character's trying to solve. The only way we can solve it is by accepting these new profound moments. And that in itself creates change and creates shifts for audiences. So it's amazing what a difference this makes. Then it's about entertaining scenes and dialogue that guides our lives. Now, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about things like in Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem, seize the day. When I ask most people what is Dead Poets Society about, they'll almost always say one of those 2 lines. They'll either say Carpe Diem or they'll say seize the day, right? It's like, and it comes out very, very powerfully. Those lines weren't said that much in that movie, but they were done in a way that had an impact, right? Those lines were delivered in the midst of profound moments. So because of that, we remember them. We remember them 10 years later, right? So it's absolutely possible to build in lines like that and to deliver them at the right moment. When you've set up the challenge and you've challenged the old ways and now you're delivering this new line in a profound way, people take it on and people live it. Now, the last day of this program, day 15, you are going to take everything we just did, and by the way, every step of the way you're applying this to your screenplay or your idea. The last day of this, you're going to take everything we just did and you will organize it into what I call a profound map for your screenplay. Now, if you have had a brand new idea and you came in with this brand new idea and you want to create a profound story out of it, what the profound map gives you is almost a complete outline for that story and how to make it profound, right? And you're going to build that at the core of your story as you go off and write that story. So we're not actually writing the screenplay at this point. What we're getting is to that profound map. And I got to tell you, this is the other thing. Reading and talking with A-list screenwriters who have written movies like this, like we interviewed Tom Schulman, who wrote the Dead Poets Society. We've interviewed other writers who have written some pretty amazing movies. The thing that happens for them a lot is once they figure out what the movie is about, once they figure out what the part is that's under the surface, they can easily write it. You know, the problem that most people have is that they haven't figured out that profound part, and so they're just writing all over the place. And I like when I hear people say, "Wow, one of my characters took the story off and ran in a different direction." It's like, okay, there's two things to that. Yes, the character they were writing, by the way. It's strange, but they're the writer, and they forgot that they're the one. But the other part to that is it almost always was at a point where they were confused about how to deliver something that mattered to them. So, and I've talked with lots and lots of people who have told me that. What this does is it gives you that complete profound map that is the underlying story of your movie. That is the thing that you're now going to build your entire screenplay around. So you're going to be starting with an incredibly profound story, and then you use all the other skills you have for writing screenplays, and you go through and write it. And that works. If you have a script that you bring into the program that you want to make profound, and let's say you've already written 3 or 4 drafts of that screenplay, totally cool. Then what you do is you go through this whole process, and at the end, you create that profound map, and you now go back to your screenplay with the profound map, and you do a couple of passes where you build all of this in. You know, it may keep your story pretty much the same. You may not have to do that much rewriting. It just may be that now what you've built in is 15 or 20 moments that quadruple the amount of profoundness in that particular screenplay. Now, this program, just so you know, for it, we analyze a whole series of movies, but we're going to give you examples that come from the movies 12 Angry Men, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, the interesting thing about that movie is it was created in 1957, and it's still around. And people still know that movie, and it's because of one specific thing they did that was truly profound. And when we discovered it, it was like, oh my God, I watched that movie 8 times before, never saw this. The moment we discovered it, it's like it's all the way through the entire movie, and it becomes one of those things that will change your own writing. We also analyzed for this class, and in this class, Dead Poets Society, Remember the Titans, The Matrix, as you've just seen, Groundhog Day, Gandhi, and Seabiscuit. So each one of these, you get to see how a movie shifts human beings, and you're going to get to see how this model is used in them. Once you see this model and understand it, once you've experienced it, anything you write from now on is going to be different. Now, 7, so it's a 1-month-long program. Normal price is $297. Right now you can get in for $50 off. You can save $50 and get in for $247. So there's a link on there. If you look in your handout, if you can just paste that in, you can go right there and join us. I promise you, this is one of those programs that's going to change your life, and that's going to give you so much more power as a writer. As with all of our programs, the deal is this: we have a money-back guarantee. If you don't like it by the 3rd day, just email us before the end of the 3rd day, and we will give you all your money back. But this is one of these ones that, you know what, people come out of this program and they say they never ever thought that way, and now they understand it, and now they're able to write movies that have a much, much, much better chance because they understand this model. I've had people say this is the most profound class they've ever gone through. So I'm serious. This thing makes a huge difference, and you will be able to use all of these skills from this point on once you learn them. So again, right now you can save $50. Just go sign up and join us. You will completely understand what is invisible to most people in profound movies. You will be able to not only pick it out and notice it, but you'll be able to go back and write your own screenplay that way. So this is something that can change your life. It really, truly can. If you want to write movies that change people's lives, if you want to shift a culture, if you have a cause, if any of those things are important to you, this class absolutely can help you do that. You know, what if you quadrupled your ability to create real transformational journeys? You know, what if you were able to shift people's way of thinking, their perspective, and even their beliefs with your movie? You know, think about this. What if you understood gradients to a level that allowed people to naturally make the change while watching your movie? And what if you were able to deliver profound scenes and characters that stay with people after that? You know, again, our objective here isn't just to have a movie that somebody watches and goes, wow, that was profound. Our objective is to have these movies be something that people watch over and over and over again, and that it makes a tremendous change for them. 1 month from now, you will have all the tools to be able to map out your profound screenplay and be able to write screenplays that make that kind of difference. So if you liked what we did here today, I promise you this is really, truly just the tip of the iceberg. When you go through this program, you are going to have so many breakthroughs, so many insights. You're going to see things that were right there and you never saw them before. You're going to have the ability then to be able to apply them and to write those kind of screenplays. So, again, it's an online course. It's delivered every other day. The program breaks this model down into little pieces and gives you exact examples and exact step-by-step processes for how to do every one of these things that we talked about today. So if that's something that's appealing to you, my advice would be jump in. The sooner you learn this, the sooner every single one of your screenplays has more impact on audiences and more impact on the readers who read them. So I want to say thank you guys for being with me today. I hope that even what we did today has made a big difference for you. And I promise you, if you join us for this class, you will be so glad you did. So with that, I'm going to close out. I'm wishing you guys the best. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U. Bye-bye, everyone.